and probably won't be mine. So I'm looking forward to what you guys will share as well. Let me pull this out. This week, lesson 10 is where we are. Strangers and pilgrims, the disciples' walk of faith. So we'll start with this verse. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. So before we get into the questions, I just wanted to kind of open up this thought. When we read this passage, strangers and pilgrims on the earth, does that mean that these people never had a physical home that they lived in that they called home? Does that mean that these people wandered from town to town in destitution their whole lives?
They were raised an army of
Right.
had whatever.
So, and it's talking about Abraham, but also these all died. Just talking about all the other heroes of faith that's also in Hebrews 11. But obviously, a lot of them had moments in time where things were really bad, and because of their faith and what they believed, they were put in positions where they had to make a choice. And so, what made them a stranger or a pilgrim? What was kind of the difference between them and everyone else around them? Right. I think that what we all look for, what we all search for, whether it's in family life or home life, business life, is we all kind of want a sense of belonging. We all kind of want to be part of something else besides us, and that's kind of gives us. But when we make a choice that we do not belong to this world, that's what makes us strangers and pilgrims in this world. Now, do we have something else much higher and stronger that we belong to? We have the modern church that was established in the first century. Obviously, these heroes that we're talking about in Hebrews are talking about before the church was established. But still, they were belonging to God. They found their belonging there. They did not find their belonging on earth. Now, did they? They all did not. Some of them did have hunger and thirst and have really bad, physical lives, but some of them had really good lives. And so we can look at that and talk about some heroes of faith like Daniel and Joseph. Well, they were sold into slavery and different things, but they also rose to high power where they were basically rulers of men, right? So, but at the same time, were they still strangers and pilgrims on the earth? Yes. So that's kind of where we want to think about strangers and pilgrims. Is it does not necessarily mean that we're going to have terrible physical lives. It's just that our belonging should not, our fulfillment of looking for belonging should not come from those physical lives or those business connections. It should come from our connection to God and to the church and one another. So what does the word stranger mean? Okay. What? Go ahead.
Or kind of like the word concept of being alone. Alone is not a
Right. You can be alone in the desert by yourself, or you could be the only one that's looking out for yourself amongst millions of people. The lesson gives us it's translated for the Greek word xenos. Then when it talks about someone being xenophobic, that's what we're talking about. Is a foreigner literally means a foreigner. A stranger is one who is out of his own country. Someone is in a foreign land. Another word that we used to use more often, but we use it in historical context. What is a pilgrim? Yeah, the lesson gives us the definition of refers to a resident foreigner. So we can be a foreigner, be a stranger, but then we can kind of move into the area, and we're still not quite accepted. We're still a resident foreigner. We have our own way of doing things. A person is who lives among people who are not his own. This person does not have the rights of a citizen nor is seeking permanent residence. He is sojourning in a place for a time. And so we're dealing with, I should probably use a PowerPoint since David went to links to provide it for us. Here we go. But someone who is not a citizen but is a resident, what typically happens with that family or that group of people that are considered resident aliens, or someone who is a foreigner who's there, but you aren't necessarily part of the common culture? Yeah, and so we see that happening both ways, right? We see the people who have been there for longer, not necessarily interacting. We also see them not being comfortable interacting with society, and so we kind of see that separation. Now, from a spiritual perspective, is what we're talking about. Can that be a good thing and a bad thing? How is it a good thing that we consider ourselves pilgrims within a community? So we want to maintain our culture, for lack of a better word. I'm sure there actually are better words, but we maintain the culture, meaning that we don't disavow our Christianity just because we're in a area that does not understand it or employ it or wants to participate in it. Your hand up.
If you're a pilgrim in an area, definition, because to live in an area that is not your own, you're not seeking permanent citizenship. You're not seeking to have equal rights and everything for the people that are living around you. You've chosen to remain separate from those that you are living amongst. In that same way, we have chosen to, we understand that while we do live here, that we are not seeking to have citizenship in the world around us, that we do know that we have to set ourselves apart.
Okay, Antonio.
Prevalent.
Right. So there's reasons why you want to maintain your integrity as far as not mixing with the other group culturally, but there's also benefits of you're in the community and you have an opportunity to share your beliefs with others. So as far as, should there be a dividing wall where you don't participate with others? Well, we kind of see that. I'm not going to say this is the best example, but it's an example that we see, like the Amish in Pennsylvania. They have their way of life. They have the things that they do, and that they won't participate in other parts of it, but do they do business with the other people around them? Do they have some other things that are going on where there is a mixing? There is. But for us, we should see ourselves both part of the community, but also our own special community, so that we're sharing things that that others don't have to share, and can provide. When we talk about, who are we? What are we citizens of? What community are we citizens of? Should we disavow our citizenship of the United States of America, or should we disavow our? I don't think so, because Paul talks about himself being a Roman citizen and having special uh, things about him because he was a Roman citizen, and so they shouldn't treat him a certain way because he was a Roman citizen, right? You can take advantage of those things your earthly citizenship provides you, but at the same time, we should also be thinking of, we happen to be born in a time and a place. We didn't really have a choice of our birthplace or our parentage, right? Paul didn't really have a choice of his birthplace or parentage, but can you take advantage of the rights that a certain government gives you to spread the gospel, or to be able to be the Christian you want to be? If we're born in China and we're converted, we have to be very careful about what we say and do publicly, because we don't have those same rights. If we're converted out of Islam in the Middle East, we got to be very careful about what we say and do publicly.
May not consider ourselves true citizens in that literal sense, but we have responsibilities. Jesus tells them to render under Caesar what is Caesar. Wherever it is that we choose, just because we consider ourselves separate, we still have to be responsible with where we have chosen to live.
Right. And so wherever we find ourselves, we can be a citizen of that country, and we can be in that way, but with an eye on the permanent citizenship that we really have. So how does Abraham view his relationship with the citizens of Canaan? This is this was on so if somebody would turn to Genesis 23. And maybe read the first 4 verses there.
Sarah lived 127 years, for the years of the life of Sarah. Sarah died at Kiriath Arba, and Canaan. Abraham went in to mourn. Abraham rose up from before his dead and said to the foreigner among you, give me property among you for a burying.
Okay, so how did Abraham view his relationship with citizens of Canaan? Yeah, so he was told to get up and leave the place where he was, and then he travels to a different city, and then he comes down into the land of Canaan. And as a side note, if you do the math, when we talk about the land of Canaan, when Abraham was there, Canaan was probably still alive. So it literally was the land of Canaan, not just some generic place that was called Canaan. It was the land Canaan owned, because of how they were contemporary. But he considered himself a sojourner visitor there, and so he still needed to bury Sarah, but he felt like this was not his land, even though what had God had told him. Told him it would be that, and so his descendants would inherit that land. So he still felt like he was not part of that. disciples are called out of this world and made citizens of a heavenly kingdom. Jordan, could you read Colossians 1:13? And Carson, would you mind reading Philippians 3:20?
He delivered us from the power of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of the Son he loves.
Okay. And then,
Our citizenship is
so when Paul's writing this, he's not dealing with a wonderful life in the Roman Empire by the time he writes Philippians 3:20, or when he writes back to Philippi. So this is would you say it's encouragement for people that are having to deal with some difficult times? So as this is kind of a reminder that even though things can be really bad, this is where our citizenship is. And this is from someone who took advantage of being a Roman citizen. So it's not necessarily that those things can be at odds with each other. So how does becoming a disciple of Christ change our citizenship? Where should it place our emphasis of our citizenship? So there's terms thrown around these days, Christian nationalism or things of those, and it's really hard to define what that even is. Can we go back in the history of our country and say, were there Christian principles used to establish it? Yes. But were all those being Christians? No. And so this is not a country established by God, but it was established on ideals that God gave man. So, but there's also a lot of humanity and things mixed in there that doesn't make it perfect, and it's not going to be perfect. And so we still see things happen in this country that are not right, but when those things happen to us or to those we see or whatever, it still becomes our real citizenship is in heaven.
And he ended up paying for it, not because he wanted it, the money, because he felt that was the right thing to do. So we as where we're pilgrims in such a way that people will see God.
Right, and we're showing the respect to the local people, wherever that is, and whether they're part of our tribe or not part of our tribe, we need to understand that our citizenship is in heaven.
Another place, Paul says, hard concept. Paul's talking about his citizenship. That deal with the things of the church. So, got to be in the world, and you got to. Also, the Christian has the concept of how solid these things were.
Right.
They're only going to last for things that we don't see. That's the really got these things for a period of time for major order in the following century. not a citizen there, you don't have the right to kind of live, you know, have to deal with the things there, planning on just leaving there and going back home. Same concept or idea. We're in the world, got to deal with the world. The things that are necessary to survive, live till we die. And eternally.
Right. And so the concept you're talking about is we have a very short time on this earth. About 6 or 7 years ago, I heard someone say that something I thought was pretty profound, and I've repeated it a few times since then. And that is, we talk about going to church or going somewhere and having a spiritual experience, or people in the world do. And he said that we need to flip that around and say and understand that we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. We're not physical beings having spiritual experiences. We are spirit, but we have a physical experience for a very shortest amount of time, and then that spiritual experience is going to last much longer than that. And of all places, somebody repeated it a couple of days ago at a real estate conference. And so I was like, well, I wonder where he heard that, because, and then Angie had a note of where he quoted it from somebody. I was like, I wonder where he heard it from, because he did not come up with that either. So it was one of those things that, one of those profound statements that underlying truth comes from the Bible. It's not a biblical quote, but you can see where it comes from. The spiritual experience is we are spiritual.
If we want to look at Israelites coming in the promised land after us being transferred in, it's kind of the same thing. They were told to chase out all the inhabitants, all the people. We see the example of what happens if we don't. If we're transferred into the kingdom, but we don't get rid of all of our past influences that might won't be inherited.
We don't want to bring our baggage with us into the new place we go that made the last place bad. So it's a moving into the kingdom that we're part of becomes that. Disciples are following one whom the world has rejected. Let's see. So that will be on here. Norma, could you read John 15, 18 through 21? It won't be on the screen.
But because you are not the world, so should I. So it's not greater than a person that we can also resolve that. All these things that we'll do for my
Yeah. So, what kind of treatment does Jesus say his disciples could expect from the world? Yeah. So why? Why should we expect that?
They react any different than the same as you.
And it's when Jesus was here and he was being, they tried to trick him. They tried to make him stumble. They tried to make him say things that they could catch him on. He never had a conversation that we've all had 100 times. We walk away from it and said, man, I wish I'd said this thing instead of that thing. Jesus never had that experience of saying, I said the wrong thing or I could have said it better. He said it the right way every single time. And did that stop them? Eventually, they got to the point where they're like, they stopped trying because they knew that it wasn't working. It wasn't working. But they up until the very end, when they couldn't find something that he actually said, they got people to lie about it.
World we are under. But when they see us,
Yeah, that's a very poignant thought. Why should a disciple consider the world to be his enemy territory? To be not his enemy territory, to be enemy territory. Antonio, I think you may have already read First John 5:19, or so why should a disciple consider the world to be enemy territory? Yeah, it's as even though God created everything, created the world, who holds sway in the world is Satan, who is controlling, or what we see as far as media, social media, everything else out there. It seems to all be something that Satan himself is putting out the media. And so when we have those conversations, we're influenced by that to some extent. But for someone who has no regard for God's word, they're swayed by it 100%. That's the only thing that they're putting into their mind is the things that are of the world.
You're bad. You're the enemy. First Peter 4 says, in regard to these, they think it's strange. And indeed we
Correct.
are strangers. We are the one that's different.
So what's interesting is when maybe it's something I have to correct in my own thought process, but when I see that there's been this great revival or something that's happened where 10,000 people have been baptized in a place or something's, I almost automatically assume that it's something other than the gospel that was preached. And maybe it was, and it's not something I would, could prove either way, but we're told that we're going to be the minority, that we're going to be a short amount of people. So even in Acts chapter 2, 3,000 people being saved, how many people were in the city? What percentage of the actual people were actually baptized there? Was there 100,000 people there? Were there 300,000 people there? It's still 3% or 0.75%, or some still small percentage, even though this was a great victory, that happened in Acts chapter 2. There's always going to be a small amount of people compared to the narrow way versus the wide way. But every time that someone is taught the gospel, it is a great victory, even just one person. But for those people who try to do the right thing and consistently do it, people are going to say, that's a little bit odd. You're just a little weird. You're not doing the things that we do. And we see that with when we're doing Uber rides and have conversations with people. What is expected of certain people is to behave in ways that are contrary to what the Bible would say, but is consistent with almost all of civilization. 1 Peter 4:14. Carolyn, would you read those 4 verses? 1 Peter 4, 1 through 4, not 14.
Just love to- Or else all the same. Sin. That's just one.
Okay, so we got to it even earlier just a moment ago, but what does Peter say that the world will think we're? Why does Peter say the world will think we're strange? Right. And,
Refuse to live.
and is it because we just decided that I'm not going to enjoy that, so I'm not going to do it? It's more that we've decided there's a better way to live than living that way. Yes.
Interesting in this letter that we're in First Peter. In First Peter 2, it gives us the reason why. And that is in chapter 2, it says, "Now you're a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession. You may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his light. Once you were not a people, now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, now you have received mercy." That's the bottom line. That's the reason we've been selected. We've been set apart. And because we believed in and are doing those things, this is why he then says in verse 11 of the same chapter, "Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles to abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against your soul." It's enemy territory. The reason it's enemy territory is because it's not our territory. Our nation isn't here. Just like Jesus' kingdom wasn't here on earth. It's in heaven. This is where we're going. That's what we long for. Hebrews 13. Let us go to meet him outside the gate, outside the physical stipulations of the old law. We're going to the new place, the spiritual place, the place where we worship in spirit and truth, and not according to the flesh, which is what the rest of the world looks like.
Right. And in the course of human history, if we go back to the Tower of Babel, language is being confused and people going out. Ever since then, it's been about tribes and families, right? It's this family goes out, they have their own language. This one goes out, has their own language. This one wants this land. This someone else's land. They're going to fight against each other because there are two different groups of people, two different families, two different tribes, two different nations, two different whatever. And that's been everything ever since that moment, because that's them and that's us, and we're not for them, we're for us. And in the course of human history, what's the only thing that has brought someone from that tribe and someone from that family and someone from that nation and someone from that nation to all agree on one thing, and that's that we have sin and Jesus Christ is the only thing that can remove that. And so we're all going to agree to that individually as we're taught. And now we are now a people. This 12 and that 8 and that 20 and that 100 and that 3,000, we're all a people. And I agree with you, but I don't agree with my own family, because my own family that I grew up with and my own tribe does not believe that. And so we were not a people, now we are a people. That's what that is. And so now we make ourselves pilgrims and strangers to our own families because we have this other set of beliefs that is higher than what that was. So that's where that comes from. So disciples are called out of the world, made citizens of a heavenly kingdom. Disciples are following one whom the world has rejected. Disciples no longer think like the people of the world. Angie, would you read Romans 12:2 for us?
Not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is good and acceptable.
And so we're not to be, not to think like other people, but the way God would have us to think. What does Peter say that the world will think? Well, I thought we already done that. I'm not sure why that's. Here we go. What does it take to live as a stranger and pilgrim in this world?
That's the fear to walk by faith.
All right. Well, somebody read 2 Corinthians 5:7 for us.
Walk by faith, not by sight.
So what does that mean?
The other thing, says we walk by faith and not by sight. That applies to everything. If you're comfortable with it. As far as we have faith. Have situations. Most of what we do. All some faith. Just all says faith in permanent, not temporal.
Heaven that we've been promised. That's what we have to be rewarded.
Let's turn to Hebrews 11 and let's read verse 13 says, "These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth." So we have a fill in the blank. Abraham and Sarah did not receive all of God's promises during their lifetime, but they were what? Yeah. So depending on which version you have, says they saw them from afar off. They were what of them? And what them? Embrace them. So they were sure, they embraced them. They saw them afar off, even though they didn't have them physically. So running low on time. We're to trust in God's promises. Romans 4:20 and 21. Butch, would you read that for us?
Not waver at the promise of God.
So we're to trust in God's promises. Let me jump ahead a little bit. 1 Peter 1:17. Somebody over here read that for us. Not sure where we are.
Call on the Father who without partiality judges work. Conduct yourselves.
So when you read throughout the time of your stay here, what does that sound like? It's almost like someone welcomes you to the Holiday Inn. I hope you have a good stay here, right? I hope while you're here, all things work out, during your stay here. It's very temporary, right? Day, 2 days, kind of feels, very short, intermittent. But Peter, by this point, has a view of things that's more than just a couple of days. So throughout your stay here on earth, the short time on earth, conduct yourselves throughout your stay here in fear. Beloved, I beg you, as sojourners and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul. Have your conduct honorable among the Gentiles, that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may, by your good works, which they observe, glorify God in the day of visitation. So, could he have just said, verse 12, you should have your conduct honorable among the Gentiles, that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may, by your good works, which they observe, glorify God. You can just take that verse, right? And that's accurate. You can just say verse 12. But when you add the perspective of verse 11, what does it remind us of? Think about this, and it will help you do this.
Context, it gives you a reason why, it tells you the state.
If you say, for the next 80 years, just don't do this. 80 years sounds like a long time, right? Over the next 5 years, you can't have pecan pie. For the next 8 years, you can't have whatever it is, the thing that you really love or really want to do. But if you say it's temporary, it's short-lived, you're not going to be here long, not in comparison to eternity. Think of yourself as sojourners and pilgrims. It's a short amount of time. Avoid this here, and you'll get something way, way better afterwards. That's the context that helps us do the 70, 80, 90, whatever the lifetime is, and understand that it's a short amount of time, and really it's a better life. You may think it's more fun. Moses was talking about the temporary, getting the phrase wrong, but the passing pleasures of sin. God acknowledging that there's pleasure in sin, but it's passing. Here it's think about yourself as sojourners and pilgrims, avoid the fleshly lust, and then you will have these other things that will happen. And not only is it good for you, it's good for who? It's good for those who speak against you as evildoers. They will come around to some extent. Some of them will. They will glorify God because they will be converted in the meantime. What admonitions does Peter give to sojourners and pilgrims? We just talked about that. What are the consequences of loving the world? Sorry, we got no time left. So let's wrap it up there. If you have not, there's only a couple of questions left. Why does Esau lose his birthright? What do followers of Christ need in order to receive the promise? And it's all about understanding that it's understanding our temporary amount of time here, and with context, being able to endure, and with the appreciation of the hope we have in heaven. And I'll wrap it up this morning.